So at this time, let me tell you a little bit about Captain Pat Shepard, everyone, all right? Captain Patrick Shepard enlisted in the Navy at 17 from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's trained as a sonar man and served on various ships, including the USS Guyot out of Norfolk, the USS Metagrol out of Hawaii, and the USS Bahia out of San Diego. Did I hear that right? San Diego. After being selected for and completing the Navy's integration program, he was commissioned as an ensign and served on the USS Katy Bailey as ASW officer, gunnery office, and first lieutenant, and USS Hamner as chief engineer. He served in Vietnam and held several high-level positions, including advisor to the Vietnamese Navy, the commissioning executive officer of the USS Arthur W. Radford. Did you hear that, everybody? The commissioning officer, executive officer of the USS Arthur W. Radford, and the commanding officer of the USS Spruance. The operations officer of the Comp's Second Fleet, the USS Shenandoah 8044, Destroyer Squadron 6, CTG 151.2, and SRU Bahrain. How many been to Bahrain, everybody? Oh yeah, lots of us, right? His shore assignments, including Flag Secretary of the Sinkland Fleet, the Naval Postgraduate School, and the Armed Forces Staff College. He has received numerous awards, including the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, and the Navy Commendation Medal. Captain Shepard is married to Rebecca Shepard, and they have a large family. They reside in Culpeper County, Virginia. Please welcome our commissioning executive officer, the USS Arthur W. Radford, Captain Pat Shepard.
Well, thank you very much. And like everybody else, I just want to thank Bud and his lovely wife for all the hard work that they do for this. And, oh, I knew there was something I forgot. Can't see the damn thing, Bud. There we go. All right. If you all could please stand and we'll start this. Won't we, Bud?
We will.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to talk about the Arthur W. Radford. And I was there with a group that for 2 years worked to commission this ship. And we were very excited about it, as were the other 5 crews that were with us at the time in Pascagoula, Mississippi. If you've never been to Pascagoula, Mississippi, well, it's there. The only thing I can remember about Pascagoula, Mississippi was we always came in second at the turtle races. If you're not one of those environmental kind of people, there are 37 varieties of turtles in Pascagoula, Mississippi. My crew managed to get the slowest turtles of anybody in the world at those races every Friday night. The ship was put together over a long period of time, and then finally we commissioned her. I've taken these operations things off of the legend that appears on the Navy printings for the Radford. And as it says, we commissioned the ship and then we steamed out of port. The first thing that happened was, as we were steaming out of port, people on the pier waving, busted up the flags, and we took off. Unfortunately, the ensign was upside down, which meant a ship in distress. I didn't know about it at the time, but in an hour, we were going to be in distress. As we shoved off out of the channel, all of a sudden, we got the call from main control that said, we broke it, and we got to go back. And what's the problem? Well, we're not sure what the problem is, but we've got to go back to Pascagoula. So we turned around, the crowd had just gotten to the parking lot, and here we came back. But anyway, it was a problem of great magnitude, and the company, being great, wanted to fix it right away. So we called up our chief engineer and said exactly what happened. He said, I'm thinking about it. So we got it fixed, and he went down and the MPA and got him in control and said, don't ever push that button again. Never push that button. And off we sailed. We finally got out of the harbor safely and got on our way. Our first assignment, as you can see, is we had to get our helicopter aboard. That shifted to another operation. We had never had a helicopter on a ship, although we had a helicopter deck, we had done the walkthroughs, but we had never actually landed. This required that our navigation outfit and the operations people find us some nice flat water where we could land this thing for the first time. Oh, in the Atlantic, yes. And so we sailed out, and her Kaler, the operations officer, and Mr. Berg, the navigator, said, it'll be fine, call Norfolk and tell them to send the helicopter. We did. The helicopter came out, and we tried to land it. Eventually, we did get the thing landed, and all went well. Nobody got killed, and that was a good thing. We finished this, and as you can see, when we returned to Norfolk, we just almost got there, and we were told to go back to Cape Canaveral. And we were going there because President Carter and Admiral Rickover and a whole bunch of Navy brass were going to now show the world the first nuclear fast attack submarine, the USS Los Angeles. They needed a safety ship alongside to do that. Well, the surface guys weren't going to let that one go by. They said, we got a brand new ship just coming up the coast. We'll send her. So we did. We went to Canaveral, and for anybody that's never seen what a safety involvement is with a submarine on the surface is a hazard to navigation, and there's no question about that. They just don't know how to do things up there. But here, what you do is down below, the submarine takes on a course and he does what he's going to do. Up above, you clear the water. So there's nobody there, so when he comes up, he doesn't run into anything. So we talked that all over, and we had a plan how to do that. It was a simple thing. You do it all the time. So we went out to do that, and we took our position. But before we went out, somebody got the word, and they let us know and said, wait a minute, that's one of those new ships that's got that bubble system that makes it, you know, silent for the submarines, and they can do a whole lot of things, and we can't embarrass the Los Angeles with the president there and everything. So we got this message that said, make noise. Make noise, okay? So we had to turn off our systems, ping with our sonar, so the submarine would know exactly where we were, so then they could say, we found him, we found him. And off we went. Now, the other part of that is when the submarine is ready to surface, they get on a course, and you get on a parallel course so that you're going just like this. Then the submarine can come up, and he can look around, everything's great, we've cleared it all for him, and it works. It's, again, an old thing with the Navy, been doing it since World War II, probably. And we didn't think it was a problem. So off we went. This time, though, we had to come at speed, because the submarine was going to do one of those out of the water in the air, and Jimmy Carter was going to open the hatch, and they would come out and take the pictures, the planes are flying and everything. So we're sitting right there on our course like we're supposed to be, going along, and all of a sudden, the submarine surfaces. Not, you know, no problem. There's Jimmy, and he's with Admiral Rickover, and they're down in the submarine, and then they surface. And up they come, and what they expect to see when they get out there is an ocean, no ships in it. What they actually saw was this, a ship coming right at them at a 90-degree angle. Well, we had 2 squadron commanders that had come on board the ship just for this operation. There was our squadron commander who had flown in from Norfolk, and the submarine squadron commander who had flown down from Norfolk, and they were sitting in the chairs on either side of the bridge. So when the submarine popped up in front of us, this destroyer squadron commander said, left full rudder. The submarine guy said, right full rudder. Captain Woodbury, knowing his ship, just said, all back full. And the old Radford just put on the brakes and stopped. And the submarine came up and everybody took the pictures. But the people in Washington who knew what was going on and got the pictures saw the submarine here and us right here and said, wait a minute, that isn't the way it's supposed to be. So they said, what happened? Well, as you can imagine, what happened? Nothing, we didn't get to say anything about what had happened. But our squadron commander said, it wasn't our fault. And the submarine squadron commander said, it wasn't us. So the operation just quieted down, and off we went to do our own business. And so we tramped along after that, and then we got this other stuff to get the rest of our training done. And so part of our training there was to get the other systems working. One of them were the gunnery systems. We hadn't used those guns before. Quick, fast, you could pump out all kinds of ammunition on those things. And Mr. Hobby and his fire control guys and the gunners, they were all ready for this. So we got out there with the opportune towing a target for us. And our gunners got the gun ready, cleaned it up, and the gun was ready. And it put out some ammunition. Boom, 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 boom. Just like that. Unfortunately, what we hit was the opportune, the tugboat. It wasn't a terrible thing. That's exactly where we hit her. It knocked a hole about that big right behind the bridge. And there was only one casualty. There was a sailor standing there when the shell came through, and it hit the bleach box and blew bleach all over. So he had bleach burns on his body. And we sent our good Doc Grider over to patch him up. And then we, of course, had to explain how that had happened. I wasn't ever sure how these things happened, but we got through with it and went on about our business. We did learn later that other ships had had that happen too. Didn't help our reputation any. Some guy on the West Coast had done it, you know, but off we went. Nobody ever volunteered to tow targets for us again. But they sent us off to do ball tops. This is North Atlantic steaming with the fleet. And now we were there, hot, and our job was ASW, get out there and get those submarines going. And so we were really excited to get up there. And we stormed out, and the fleet was glad to have us, because they knew how good the ship could really be. And the one thing we needed was decent weather. So once again, we called on our meteorologists. We called on Admiral Kaler there and his boys to tell us how the weather was going to be. They said it'll be fine, just go on up there. So we did. And there they were, watching the bridge for us. His boys had done a great job. And here's what we found. We ran into a storm that I'd never seen before. And I'm talking 60 and 70-foot waves. Now, a lot of people say they've been in big storms before. You know, it's really rough out there. Until you've been in one that's 60 or 70 feet, then you know you've been in a storm. But what happened with the ship, it would look like it was taking off like a rocket, and there was nothing underneath you. The sonar dome and everything come right out of the water. And then it would start down, and as it started down, you're looking up at this wall of water that's well over the bridge. Say, my God, you know, this is not good stuff here that we're in. We had to go for 3 days before we could turn the ship around. We just could not physically turn the ship around. It was dangerous. But we got up there and finally got the ship turned around, started back down to do the ball tops. Again, searching for submarines, making sure everything was done right. First thing we had to do then was get gas. This was going to be our first unrun. We'd gotten a lot of gas from the pier. This was going to be in heavy seas with somebody providing all that service for us. So we were had to prepare for it. We had to break in a bunch of sailors that had never done anything like this before. And so that's what the ship looked like as we started looking for some way to get some gas and get some food and other things. And of course, there's a picture of Radford right there, alongside an aircraft carrier getting just what we needed, the food and the gas and everything else. We also had to train the crew at that time about getting things aboard the ship on lines that were coming across. And the one thing they said was, now don't pile up anything because the way the weather is and everything. It's got to come across quick and it's got to get below quick, and don't get tangled up between the stuff that's coming in the baggies and the stuff that the engineers are getting in the hose. No problem at all. We went right to it, and you can see they had no trouble piling up those things and getting. It was an exciting experiment. It really was. Now, you remember Mr. Schilling, if you'd been watching the Mail, talked about getting the crew all churned up by playing some music while you were approaching the oiler. Everybody got their juices up and they wanted to go, and they were seeing the oiler there. And it's, again, a simple operation, but for you that haven't been out there or seen one of them, the oiler just goes on a course, and then he puts a flag up at half-mast on the side of the ship where you're going to go. And then when he's ready for you, he closes it up and you come up alongside. In the old steam Navy, you went up there kind of slow because you couldn't stop the ship real quick. So you kind of just creeped up there and got where you were supposed to be and then threw the lines across. These ships, like Radford, were not made for that. They were made for getting up there quick and getting what you needed. And so we did, and the music sounded great. And the crew liked it. Well, I remembered that. And in a later tour, when I was driving this ship, I had a crew that had not been to sea, and you know, they were. I wanted to get them as excited as the other crews been when you're doing it, but I didn't want to do it quite the way we had done it on the Radford. So the waiting station of 200 or 300 yards behind the ship, I pulled the ship much farther back than that. And then told the officers, they worked it out and said, here's how we're going to do it. And what we did was we played some music. And I'm hoping this will help you right here. And we went from side to side behind the Oilers. Those guys were looking back. What's this? What's this? Where are they going? And they're looking, and when they got to the point where they said, put the flag up, we started coming, full out, pushing a big wave of water in front of us. And then we got right up to where we were supposed to go, and the officer there, they love to do it. They just love to do it. As that music came in, go, fast as they could go. And then slam on the brakes, stop. By that time, the guys on the Oilers, where did this guy come from, you know? And the crew loved it. They just thought it was great that you could do something like that, have a little fun, and also get your job done. And so we always used Jaws to do that, and because it always confused the Oilers, which side is he going to? What the hell's going on back there? You know? But we liked it, and I remembered it when I heard him say, playing about the music for the Radford. It was a good thing. Oh. Now, we're going back to the ball tops. We'd gotten our fuel, we'd gotten everything, and now Mr. McCauley, who was the weapons guy, and Mr. Kaler there, the operations guy, and Mr. Ratic, who was the ASW officer, they said, we have swept the ocean clean. There are no submarines here. We can go on. Great. This is a picture we got from the submarine. It's 500 yards off of our beach. And so we said, okay, all right. But the operation was over, and we decided we would go on now to our port calls. Once again, the crew is new. They hadn't been to Europe before, most of them. And the welfare and rec officer had spent many hours getting together passes, free passes for them to go to museums and libraries and see architecture and all that sort of stuff. And so we pulled in and told the crew they had to behave and do all those things that you do. And they went out to view the sites. And, of course, they viewed the sites. And I have to explain this one to you. If anybody ever saw this movie, there's a scene where they bring the drunken sailors back to the ship, and the shore patrol says to the guy, we caught the boats in a small boat with 2 women and a chicken. And the officer of the deck says, is the chicken okay? What happened to us was we were sent to a little island called St. Croix. And St. Croix in those days was controlled, the bars on at the little town there were controlled by some mafia families from New York and New Jersey. We didn't know that, it wasn't in the brochure. But we turned the crew loose and they were, ready to go, and they went on downtown and did what they did, and all of them had gone. And I was still on the ship doing what XOs do when the crew is ashore. I was filling out pre-mast things, So there they are, and I get a call from the quarterdeck, says, XO, you better get out here. I said, okay. I walk out, and here comes a sailor up the prow, and his uniform is torn, he's got blood all over him, and he's heading this way. I said, ooh. Yeah, there he is, yeah. And then we wait a minute later, I'm watching this guy come, and here comes another one. And then a little later, here comes another one. I said, what the hell is going on? And old Chief Mac Carthen was up there with me. Now, you guys, some of you remember the pre-com crew. Mac Carthen was one of the first master at arms that we had in the Navy. We had just gotten that rate He had been in World War II. And he had been in Korea. And then he got out of the Navy and became a deputy sheriff in Texas. But when he saw the new ships, he got a hold of the Bureau and said, I want to volunteer to come back and be in your Master at Arms Force, but I want one of those new ships. So they sent him to us. And I got his record and looked at it, and I thought, gee, he's 56 years old. I mean, yeah, come on. But when he got to the ship, he was great. He was really great. But he's standing on the quarterdeck with me, and the officer of the deck is there as these guys are coming trailing in, and then one of them comes running up and says, XO, you better do something. I said, why? What am I going to do? He says, there's a mob coming from the town, and they're going to tear up the ship because their bar got torn up. I said, okay. I got about, what, 12 guys on watch? 15 maybe in here? At least 15 sober that I know. And so I said to the officer of the deck, I said, sound general quarters, repel boarders. He looked at me like, what? I said, general quarters, repel boarders. That call hadn't been put out on a Navy ship since the Barbary pirates in 18. So they come up, you know, putting their clothes, putting their belts on and all this sort of stuff, and they've got their rifle and they're standing up there. And one of them asked Chief Carthen, did we put the bullets in? And Carthen said, what good is it without the bullets? So there we are. And here comes the mob. And this guy comes up onto the brow and he says, we're coming aboard the ship. I said, no, you're not. Now, I didn't know what I was going to do after that, but I said, no, you're not. Just at that time, a guy comes out of the crowd. He's about 6'6", got shoulders on him like this. And he walks up the brow and he turns around, and as he turns around, he opens his coat, and you can see the shoulder holster in his coat. And he looks out at the crowd and he says, go home. And they all just disappear. Just like that. That's all he said was, go home. And off they went. I was so relieved you couldn't believe it. I loved that guy. I would have commissioned him right there on the spot. Unbelievable. But that's what happened in St. Croix. And it's still to this day there, and it's in the Navy record there, because we had to go pay for the bar bill, for the broken furniture and the bugs. But anyway, we left there and proceeded to our home port after being gone for so long. And we went up to our home port, and the captain said, we're going to do something for the families and everybody else. We are going to have a dependence cruise. Lovely. We get them on board the ship and we sail out. The Chesapeake Bay is flat as a pancake. The weather is beautiful. The cooks, who had, you know, done a magnificent job of preparing the food, as they always did, they had it all out there onto the flight deck, and everything was going great. I walked out there to see it. Everything was going great. I saw the captain. I walked up to where he was, and while he was talking to me, a little speck appeared on his uniform. I thought, what the hell is that? I looked at it. It was a little gray and kind of brown. I thought, And so I just didn't pay any attention to it for a minute, but then there was another officer standing on the other side of him, and I saw one of those pop up on his uniform. And I realized what it was. I went over to the supply officer and I said, tell your troops to get these food tables and get them in the hangar. He said, what? I said, get the food in the hangar right now. I said, I don't care what you tell them we're going to land a helicopter. I don't care, just tell them, get the food. He said, okay. I made a real trip down to the engineering spaces, and I said, who's the idiot that started the incinerator? We had a machine on there that was new also, and it was supposed to burn all of the stuff from the toilets and make it an ash that you would not even see. I mean, it was supposed to burn it, so, you know, it was there. Well, got the environmental specialist in Mr. Lynch's division and got them up there and said, I talked to the division officer there and I said, what in the hell were you doing? And he said, well, we figured with all those people on board and the toilets all being used that we should, get rid of them. So I said, yeah, okay, I got that part of it. I said, is there anything else that came across your mind when you made that decision? And he said to me, well, as my uncle once said, you ain't gonna clear this water up till you get the pigs out of the creek. So, okay, I got it. So then I called up Mr. Lynch to ask him what he thought about this comment. And Mr. Lynch said, I gotta think about it. But after that, not too long after that, and a few other things, I left the Radford and went on. But I followed her. And she went to the South Atlantic, the North Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, and had a whole life string of things that happened to her. This is one of the unfortunate things. This is when she tangled with a Saudi tanker in the Thimbles Channel. Poked a pretty good hole in her side, and she had to come in and get some repairs from that. But she managed to go on and do another 25 years or so after that of fine service to the Navy, and was always a good ship. Now, we have something that we need to have that's serious kind of talking, and that's your Navy today. And the Navy that you came out of, that you enjoyed, is not there. The Navy Department said just recently, we can't fight 2 wars. We used to be able to, but you got to pick this time. You want us to go to China, we'll take what we got and go. You want to go the other way, we'll take what we got and go, but we can't do both. They also said that 30% of the ships that are out there right now shouldn't be sailing at all. They're so behind in their maintenance that they simply shouldn't be out there. They can't perform their missions. There's no maintenance for them back here because all the maintenance back here has been let go. And so we got a lot of little shipyards around here, but they can't repair these ships. Why? Because they don't have the troops either. They don't have the technicians, they don't have the people to do the jobs that we would expect them to do. Why? Because they're not getting fed the sailors that are retiring that had the skills to go do that. So it's a serious maintenance and issue problem, plus the fact that you might know that most of your Navy is either just back from a deployment or just going on a deployment. They're running them 8 months at a time now in combat zones. People talk on Washington, there's nobody getting shot at. Bull. Those sailors are getting shot at every day out there. And tonight, if you had time to watch the news tonight, the fleet came under attack from the Houthis out there. A massive bunch of Houthi rockets and stuff aimed at the ships. Now, that's a big deal because, you send 3 or 4 of those things, you hit one of those carriers out there, you got a real problem on your hands. So that's where we are today, and we are now dipping into the bottom 10% of recruits. We used to not go below 50% of. You gave a guy a test and he couldn't make 50% on the score. We'd say, sorry, try the Marines, But we're taking 10% now. Why? Because we need them. So you know what the problems are going to be from that. And another problem, which people say, 30% of the joint forces, that's Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine, are now women. There are logistics problems with taking women to sea that we didn't used to have. But now they make up such a bulk part of the force that, you know, it's a problem. It's a real problem. And so these people, the people in Washington have to figure this out and figure it out the right way. And we can give them a little help because you have inputs to people, you know, your congressman, you're this or that. You can express your feelings and say, the military needs help. It needs to be funded properly. They need to be resourced properly in terms of where they're going and what they're going to do. And you can't farm them out to everybody. I mean, they can't go and protect the Ukraine, go protect the Taiwan Channel, go protect the Red Sea, go protect the Persian Gulf. Won't work. Aren't that many of them, and you can't keep them out there that long. Getting back to the issue of the crews, I don't mean to say that women shouldn't serve in the military. They can. I commanded a ship that had a crew of 1,550 men and women, and 500 of them were women. And they did a fine job. But it takes years to change that mindset of everybody on the ship. Now, this is a picture of an officer that I were pinning on her SWO badge, her Surface Warfare Officer pin. She qualified. And she was one of the first officers to qualify as a surface warfare officer. And the reason she's laughing is because I wasn't qualified. I had never stuck my hand inside of a woman's shirt to pin a pin. So I was, and I had no book to tell me how to do it. And so that was that. But she was very, very smart, and she did her job and all the jobs she was assigned after that. You might know her better today if you saw her. This is Lisa Franchetti, the Chief of Naval Operations. This is the top admiral in the United States Navy who has to wrestle with all these problems. And she's had all the jobs. She's been commander of the 6th Fleet. She's commanded a ship. So she's got all of the background to do the job. But I tell you right now, she's got more on her plate today than Admiral King had on his plate after Pearl Harbor. Believe me, that's where she is right now. So we can help with all of this. People that are out and about, because you've got to tell these young people, everything will kill you. So, you know, pick something that you really like to do. But young people today need to understand what the Navy is all about, all the services, but primarily the Navy, so that's what we're interested in. And that it's a good career. They'll learn skills that they can't learn anyplace else that will carry over into their civilian life if they stay 4 years or 40. Doesn't make any difference. They'll have a skill that they can move right out into the civilian world. And so it's important to let them do that and let them know that. Right now, a lot of these kids don't really know what they want to do, but the Navy will give them that opportunity to grow up and find out what they want to do and how they're going to do it, and to give them the skill set to go do it. And after life, you get out of the Navy, you've all had careers out of that, and many of you got your career out of that because of the training you had in the Navy. It was something that was available to do that. For myself, when it came time for me to go, I'd been in the Navy almost all my life, since I was 17. And I had spent my life, as I reflected on it, training young sailors and young officers. Now, they're not a group that lend themselves to training. Sometimes you have to use logic, and sometimes you have to use discipline. But you have to get them molded and going right. So I thought to myself, what could I do if I leave here, where I've got to take some big somebody, not Lynch, but some big somebody, and teach them discipline and teach them how to do things and get along with them. And so I did find something to do. I decided I would train horses. And so I have done that, and my Navy training has helped me do that. So it's the same kind of thing that you do. You can do this and you can help these young people, and we need them now because our recruiting is terrible. We're 30,000 sailors short. 30,000 short. And the ones we're taking in make us probably about 50,000 short, if you want to know the truth of it. So, this is where the trail ends, right here. This is a group that got together in March on a cold day, and we sailed out, and some of them were the plank owners. We were there when she was birthed, and now we're going to put her to sleep. So we took her out there, and we expected to be out there for an hour, hour and a half. After about an hour and a half of them trying to sink her, and she wouldn't go down, they had to send another crew out there with more explosives and go aboard the ship and do the whole thing all over again. We stayed out there, I think, about 6 hours total. And she fought them, and she fought them, and she fought them, and finally, they put her down. And she's serving her country today as a reef out there in the bay, and she'll be there serving there for 100 years, 1,000 years, who knows. But she's still there doing her job. I remember that day, but I don't like to think of her that way. I like to think of her as a brand new, shiny ship sailing through the water at 30-some knots, pushing a huge wave in front of her, you know, and with all those weapon systems and everything that she could have. And I like to remember her that way, you know, just like that.